The wheel weaves as the wheel wills, and we are just a thread in the pattern. Welcome to Weaves and Will Talk, a weekly review podcast for fans of Robert Jordan's The Wheel of Time book series and the Amazon show of the same name. With help from my nerdy friends, we will discuss aspects of fantasy fiction and review episodes of the Wheel of Time show as fans of the franchise. Join us as we explore Randland together. And remember, be steadfast. Hello and welcome again to Weaves and Will Talk. Today's episode will be a continuation of last week's podcast dealing with the representation of females in fantasy fiction, except this time, instead of just comparing it to powerhouses like J.R.R. Tolkien, we're going to expand it to the field of literature in general and cross over into female representation in our real day-to-day lives. It's important for young women, young girls, and to some extent the entire population to see female representation in their lives, whether that be in their household, in their neighborhoods and communities, or on the small screen, on the large screen, or on the written page. Because you tend not to be able to conceive of becoming that which you can't see in your day-to-day life, or you don't even come across in your imaginative life. Thankfully, we are reaching a time and a point in modern society where that representation is increasing. It is becoming more prevalent in our day-to-day lives, and that's beginning to resonate through our society and culture. But is it happening fast enough? I personally would argue it is not. And you can see that just on the bookshelves of your local bookstore, where to this day the predominance is still white males writing about white males. No matter how fantastical the text, it still seems to fall back to that traditional Western European-based stance. Is it necessary? I don't think so. I think that we as humans, we as writers, we as creators of this imaginative content can do so much more. We're capable of so much more. And this is one of the reasons I keep coming back to the Wheel of Time itself, because while it is not perfect, do not get me wrong, it's still got a lot of flaws in how some of the women are represented or treated, but by and large, he did something phenomenal and very different from the tradition in which he was writing. And that was, he gave not only females a platform and a chance to speak, but he gave them plot lines that were their own. He gave them motives that were their own and allowed them as characters to pursue those motives, those dreams, those ambitions, just like a male character would. And he has male characters in there. The main protagonist could be argued as three, white males, which is typical of fantasy. But their entire, I hesitate to say supporting cast because they're not really supportive. The entire ensemble of the cast is composed predominantly of females. And I think that's wonderful. But by that same token, simply including females or switching out a character that was traditionally male for a new character that is female but carries the same history and story of the male character without making any considerations for what a gender change might reveal or influence or affect isn't progress. That's lip service. That's being lazy. That's riding a trend. But if you take that character change his gender, but keep the essence of what made that character who then he was, and adjust it for who now she is, then that could be considered as progress. But you have to give it its due diligence. It can't be just a copy and paste. It has to be a reimagining in every sense of the word. Thankfully, though, I don't have to reimagine this all by myself. Today's episode will feature two lovely ladies, one with a background in English literature and the other with a background in diversity, equity, and inclusion, to speak to us about the importance of female representation both on and off the page. Stay tuned. Hello again, and welcome to Weave and Will Talk. Today we have two wonderful ladies to continue our discussion on female representation in fantasy fiction and in life. Please welcome them to the show. Aisha, Brooke, say hello.
Hello. Hi, everyone.
Hello. Hi, everyone. How are you doing? Hope you're doing well.
So, as you may know, Amazon is producing a Wheel of Time show premiering on the 19th that's based on the Wheel of Time book series. One of the major reasons this book series caught my interest and attention as a reader was because of the incredibly high number of female characters. And I don't mean just background characters. I'm talking about fully fleshed out, well-rounded women in positions of authority. They have their own plot lines. They don't have dependency on romantic story arcs. And as I was looking at these books, I was like, wow, this is really different. And I know you two have not read the books before, but I'm curious, what has your experience been when it comes to seeing strong females, and that can be in literature, on TV, film, or in real life?
Would you like to start, Aisha, or me?
Go ahead, Brooke.
All right. So I thought a lot about this, and it's moving in the right direction. I think we're getting more female characters that are multidimensional. I think in the past, and as an English major in college and grad school, um, the literature that we read, I felt like the women were always at extremes, and they were caricatures or generalizations and stereotypes, assumptions of women's behavior. So you either have like, a pregnant teen, a whore, or a or etc. It was always, it was never, or some mouse woman that follows behind the man, and has to endure these struggles and all this. And it's it gets to the point where you're just like, well, we're the regular people, or can't we be the superhero? All these type of things. And for example, okay, Captain Marvel. So excited. Like, yes, she is the business, she is the major, she has all the powers. Like, she could there was no need for Endgame, okay, because she could have just ended it. But then it was just like, oh, I was on another planet, I was doing other things. Like, wait a minute, I expected more from her, to have the powers that she had, and then to be so limited in how she helped. And it was disappointing, to the point that I didn't finish her or the Endgame. Like, I was just like, forget it, I'm over it. And that's an issue for me, because I like to read, I like to learn, I like to get knee deep in characters and who they are, and to just have kind of lackluster options kind of makes you not want to makes you not want to read, makes you not want to venture out and get to know these characters. I think an author that I really like right now is Jesmyn Ward, and I've been reading a lot of her work. And here it is almost, it happens racially too, it happens with gender. about how we are stereotypical or this or that, but I feel like she does it in a way that's not offensive
Mm-hmm.
and that I can relate to or relate that I know someone like that.
Mm-hmm.
Especially a lot of her stories and things take place in the South. So I'm like, oh, I know that street, or oh, that I know that city, or I know that neighborhood. And so she makes me become involved and not as offended. Um, but I will be quiet off my soapbox. I will let Aisha step into this conversation about how you feel about
Thanks, Brooke. I mean, I take the lens very similar to Brooke, just in regards to characters that I've thought of over the course of my lifetime. Now, I will say that I'm more of a non-fictional reader, but with that being said, even with that, there's just this sexualization of women characters. They're
Mm-hmm.
even with the Wonder Woman or Storm. I mean, it's like, dang, their whole leg is open, the boobs are out, they got a giant waist. I'm
Mm-hmm.
like, golly, I can't even like really get into the substance of the character because what I see first is just this body image of what a woman is quote unquote supposed to look like, right? And so that's the same parallel with the things like Barbie dolls and things of that sort. And I really believe in my mind that, especially as young readers, we have this idea of what perfection looks like as a woman. And then you have all of these issues around, you know, what's the word, bulimia, and what's the other one where you
Anorexia.
yeah, anorexia. So,
Mm-hmm.
those things really are impactful. If you're reading this and you're seeing these images, you're beginning to visualize this, you're going to naturally want to be the character in some fashion or form, even as an adult. And so that has a really negative impact. And so, it makes me feel like that a lot of these people that are creating these shows and these movies and these characters are males. And that's ridiculous because in my opinion, I, as a female, are going to know a female way better than another male, right? So I believe, and I'm so glad to hear to the point that you're talking about this new show having all of these female characters, which makes me think that the people that wrote the book, and I could be wrong, and the people that are producing the show are more females in the group because that's now being lifted, and so that's why it's so important to have representation in the background because when at these tables you need to have the discussion that is a real experience of whatever we're writing about, and in this case females, right? So so I'm just glad to hear it because it's long overdue in terms of having real examples and life stories of the woman's journey, and it's all complex because we're not a monolith, but from body image to stories to family life to society to work, all of that is so important, in my opinion.
Yeah, and you hit on some major points. I was just sitting there trying to keep track of like, oh my God, that's so good. Oh my God, that's so good. But I'll try to hit the ones I remember. Particularly, I can't vouch for the show maintaining that same inclusivity and diversity of character. I hope they do because it is a pillar of the book series itself. But since the original author has since passed, in fact, he actually passed away before he completed the series, but his notes were so detailed that another author was picked to finish the books for him, and that author still is still alive, and I'm told was involved in the production of the show. So fingers crossed that they hold to the vision that this guy wrote, and it did come from a white male who composed this 14 book series
Wow.
where most of the kingdoms are run by women. It's all queendoms, really. Most of the councils or the people that you seek wisdom from are females. The literal most powerful characters are all females. And so it's unique in that regard. So I really hope they stick with it. But another point you brought up that I thought was really good, Aisha, was the physical portrayal of women on the screen in particular,
Yeah.
because you have the flip side of the one. If you have to be a hero, if you're lucky enough to be a hero, even though you're underutilized, as Brooke pointed out, you tend to be put in these skin tight things. You're a perfect size 2 or 4, doing all these acrobatic stuff. But if you see a woman of any curvature, she's going to be the villain.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And so it's not only reinforcing the almost impossible slim ideal body type, but it's also villainizing anyone that doesn't fit into that.
Yeah. And it makes me think when you just spoke to, not to get off of the topic, but and to pivot, but when you were talking about the queendom, it makes me think about how men see it and even how women see other women leading or running, a society or a group or organization. It just makes me think about it and then I went just based on me and going to seminary and how difficult it was for women in the um in the audience to see women in the pulpit, right, and kind of run, if you will, a church. So I wonder how it'd be interesting to me to get feedback of how women feel about seeing all of this woman power stuff.
Uh,
I agree.
Go
I think
ahead.
it would be a recent experience that I had was at a previous workplace. Um, I felt like that the woman was really taking into account everyone's points of view and feelings and issues where that didn't happen before with the male that was in charge. But she was met with um, you know, a front, like people didn't like it, people were mad, people were complaining at each and every step. And the women were the ones that were the worst with it. It's
Mm-hmm.
like, and I was like, wait a minute, and these are some of the same women that when the man said crazy stuff, they immediately were like, yep, that's it. Well, he knows what he's doing, he's in charge. But when a woman who comes in with a thoughtful approach that is much more community oriented, it was met with, disappointment, disagreement. No one wanted to follow through. So I think in real life, to Aisha's point, yes, we see this every day played out in our work, in our, wherever we go, our churches, whatever community thing that you're involved in or go to, you see this played out over and over and over again with, unfortunately, women being some of the most negative. What was the girl, the Australian actress that was Fat Amy in Pitch Perfect?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, yeah.
She was met with a lot, and she had to be the funny person. Like if she ever tried to be the love interest or the serious actress, it was met with like, well, who is she trying to be? What is she trying to do? And it was from women.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm just like, she's hilarious. And then she can, play a serious character. And then she can do this. And then she's brilliant. She's like a lawyer. I mean, all these things. And she was still met with, because of her size, uh, and that she was a woman. I mean, we have fat actors that make it big all the time, men, and nobody
Mm-hmm.
cares. And here she is, and her size didn't bother me, but clearly it made some women very, very, very mad and upset. So yeah, I totally agree, Aisha.
Well, see, and that's one of the things that's become an issue at different Comic Cons or Dragon Cons and any of the Nerd Fest conventions that I'd love to go to, because the whole premise of being able to gather and indulge yourself in these deep into the fantasy and the fandoms that you love and dress up as these characters was because of the general acceptance. These were all outsiders that are together now and can have that kind of community. But as more female characters like Captain Marvel, like Black Widow show up, you want to dress up as those. And if you don't have their body type, they're beginning to, it's not on mass culture, but there are small groups that are body shaming these participants for being a size 15 or 16 trying to dress like Wonder Woman. And that the whole culture was based around acceptance, and yet they're now beginning to exclude just like normal culture does.
Wow, that's disappointing.
And
I,
typically led by women.
Mm.
mm,
So I guess that kind of ties into my next question, which is how important is it to maybe fill that gap or increase the amount of female representation and participation that we see everywhere, both in our workspaces, in our places of worship, and in our places of entertainment.
Very important. As an educator of little ones, they cannot imagine future possibilities for their lives without being able to explore creatively or in real life the actual concrete possibilities. Just like I was so happy the twins were born when Obama was still president. I was excited beyond belief when the first Spider-Man that Langston saw on screen was a little black boy running around. Even though it was a cartoon,
Mm-hmm.
I was like, oh, this is so awesome. He seeing yourself as a superhero. No, we know we can't be superheroes, but there are a lot of things that are superheroes and values and things that they do that we take with us and want to apply in our real life or strive to be like. Um, and I think it's so important for us to be able to relate to the people that we see. Um, like when Obama became president, speaking as a biracial individual, I was like, oh my gosh, wait a minute. You know what I'm saying? He got accepted by everyone. He's the president.
Mm-hmm.
Then let's not only say, all the little black kids around America saw this and we're like, oh my goodness, this is awesome. This is possible for me. I can imagine myself, whether in this space or the CEO of Fortune 500, whatever it is.
Mm-hmm.
It is very important for us to have representation, real representation, and also creative representation in everything that we do, because you can't see yourself in it if you've never had that I guess that space to imagine it, and you can't imagine it without ever seeing it or hearing it or seeing people that look like you going here or doing this. And I think it's very important for little girls and young women to be able to see women in all types of situations, facts, whatever the situation may be. Every woman doesn't have to be a mother. Every woman doesn't have to be, a business professional, suited out power player. And we're still valid and our stories are still important to be told because there's somebody listening. There is somebody watching that that we can resonate with. And I feel like it pulls them up. And I know I'm taking it from a child's or young adult's perspective, but that's where I see the vast, or I guess the not monumental, but the largest example of how this type of stuff can cause detriment or bring people up. And when you have everybody wanting to read the book about Captain America, and then the little girl comes up and there's no book for her, that's not okay.
Mm-hmm.
Because my daughter doesn't have, a superhero Black female that's awesome, that's on the screen, that has t-shirts and book bags and books to read, and and so her age books, let me say that. So I'm really digging this new Ada Twist cartoon that's I think it's on Netflix. I don't know, they love it. But she's a little girl and she's like 7 or 8 and she's a scientist, so she goes in and does this whole lab, and Ellie is all about science and engineering. And to see another little girl, and the first thing she said was, "Mommy, she looks like me."
Oh.
And I was like, she does. And it made me so happy that she's able to see a little girl that's in a STEM field and making big moves and, changing the world from where she stands. And so, yes, it is very important for female representation in life and literature and fiction and nonfiction, whatever it is, we need to be there.
And see, Aisha, I know your job and expertise specifically centers around inclusion and diversity, not just for women, but complete inclusion and diversity. So, how do you see the lack representing itself, and how do you see maybe it moving toward change?
Yeah, I mean, and we talk about this often. We're lifelong friends that have always kind of had these discussions around inclusivity and equity, even though we weren't calling it that then. It was all about just making sure no matter who you were, that you were, you belonged, you felt valued, you felt honored. I mean, I think a lot of that had to do with the fact that we were in the arts, and the artsy fartsy kids, you can already create that image of what that looks like. But
Uh huh.
I think we got that foundation early because it was all walks of life with all walks of thought coming together and creating things that were beautiful, right? So for me, I think about this and I talked to dad about it as well. I can't wait for the day when it's not the first this or the first that. You know,
Yeah.
it used to be like this big deal of, oh, I'm the first this or I'm the first woman to do this, but then it's so daggone lonely there, right? So I was like, oh, I'm so glad to be this first person on the board as a woman, but shoot, when I'm on the board, I'm like, I'm fighting for attention. I'm fighting for my voice to be heard. I'm being discounted, with my comments when my male colleague says the same daggone thing and everyone seems to listen to it.
Mm-hmm.
That's just a personal experience, and I don't want that for the women behind me. While I recognize, and many of us are doing this in our places and spaces, so let me be clear, I'm not the only one. But women are coming, we're trailblazing, but it's hard. It's hard when you're the only one, and so that's why it's so critical that those who are trailblazing, i.e., ourselves as females, make sure that we're thinking about others and pulling them behind us so they won't have that same barrier, door, glass, whatever the analogy is, to kick down, break, etc. And I mean, to Brooke's point, I don't like saying you can't be what you can't see, but I'd like to say you can be what you can see. And the reality is, a lot of us who are doing our careers now, think about our parents. Most likely we're doing something sort of similar, if not the same thing. And why is that? Because we literally saw
Mm-hmm.
that every day. So it's the same for this women. It's important for us as women our age, who I like to call myself a millennial, but I'm not. Um, for Gen Xers, for millennials, for Gen Y, for all of them, to see female representation, because females rock. We've done so. I mean, I'm not gonna break it down and say a woman is better than a man, even though I feel that way. But you can edit that out. Females bring, especially when they're leading a tribe or an organization, they bring two parts. They bring kind of this awareness of community, because they have like this soft side, but we're also very strategic as women too, so that makes for a great leader. And so I think we have to begin to change the narrative for young girls or young women who are listening to this, that you are a natural born leader as a woman. We bring life to the world. That's amazing. And I think there's just been so much propaganda around women being docile, like Brooke was saying, or women being the or women being not what's the word, not intelligent, all of those things. And that's just not true. And then that ends up mirroring in even our fictional world, because those worlds collide, nonfiction and fiction, one play off of the other. And
Mm-hmm.
so if we're not making sure that we have representation on both sides, we'll never be able to get to a place where women are truly celebrated for all that they are. In ways that like I said, ways that I think that we can resolve it and move towards hope. I'm hopeful, because Gen Y and Gen Z, they are not playing. They are saying, we want to see ourselves. We want to hear ourselves. We want to be in this space. We want to belong. We want to feel valued. And so the time is coming. And so I'm hopeful about that, but I recognize that this, being the first or being the only, that is no accomplishment. And let me be clear, if you're, early 40s and 50s and 60s, okay, but we talking about 2021. I should not be saying I'm the first female that sits on a board at this point. I just should not. So I'm ready for the day when when that's not a part of the conversation. It's just leaders in their own places and spaces.
And it's so timely that you mentioned, tired of being the first, especially, in 2021. And yet next week, I'm going, excuse me, I'm going back to my hometown so I can cast a vote for what is possibly the first female sheriff of our county.
Right.
And like in
Right.
2021, it's ridiculous.
It's crazy,
We
and
just
it
got
doesn't
our
take away.
first female vice president. I mean, and half the country are women, maybe more. And we just got her. Like, and the thing about where Aisha said it's tiring, it's exhausting to be that, because not only are you bringing all this history with you, that you're standing on the shoulders of women who tried and couldn't get there, and now you're here.
Hmm.
You also are the spokesperson for whatever, you're the first, whatever it is, you're the one that they add, well, what do women think, or what do black people think, or what do I cannot, that's exhausting.
Mm-hmm.
And it makes it to where you don't even want to participate and do those works anymore, whether it's your job or, volunteerism or whatever it is, because I shouldn't have to answer for everybody. I should only have to answer for Brooke. And I feel like that puts people, the demand on their time, their experience, and just how they carry themselves. It's too much weight, because you're always second guessing yourself or thinking like, okay, well, if I do this, then they'll think women do da da da. Well, no, it needs to be, this is what Brooke thinks, and this is what, but that's not the case. And I think that happens to a lot of women, a lot of people of color. We end up having to take on everyone's struggles or everyone's fight. And it comes to a point where, I got to take care of me. So I can't do this anymore. And that's not okay. I think we have, what are they calling it? The Great Resignation.
Mm-hmm.
I think a lot of that has to do with women being like, I want to see the divorce rates too, as they come out over this pandemic, because I think that speaks to a lot of the things that women have been required, or of having to make a choice between home and work, or not enough money, or not a way to survive, or not this or not that. And I just went to a conference, yesterday or day before yesterday, and the thing was, women in the state of Mississippi, the amount of the households that we run, that we're the head of the household, and how Black women are only making 56 cents to the man's dollar.
Wow.
That is way below the national average.
And even the national average is what, I think 17 cents below the
The
average for a male.
national average is a dollar, and then women are 82 cents.
And then you do women of color, and it drops another, what, 10 or 15 cents.
Yes, and in
Yeah.
Mississippi, the statistics are alarming. And it was just, as I'm sitting in this meeting, I'm having to turn off my camera because I'm just like, are you freaking kidding me? And forget how you feel about being unmarried or unwed mothers or whatever it is. I don't care. The fact of the matter is that if she's working, she's doing the same amount of work, sometimes double the work, because she is running a house and working at that place, and she's making less. That is just like throwing trash, or I don't know, throwing chunk change, that's what you can call it, at her for her effort. And it becomes to the point like, why am I doing this if I'm not going to be valued and appreciated the same as my male counterparts? What's the purpose? So everything that we say, and like Aisha said, we thankfully have had a group of women that started out as girls, that have been able to express these feelings and kind of work them out privately without having to do it publicly, so we could face these challenges. But every woman does not have that safe space. So it's sad, but I am hopeful too. I got to be hopeful. In order to be an educator, I have to have faith and have hope that things are going to change for the better, and that the young minds that I'm helping to mold will be in a better place because of me, or because of my female counterparts at this time, or male counterparts, because like I said, this new generation is not going. They are like, accept us as who we are. You can't call me that. I will be called this, and I will not address you if you don't speak to me that way. And you know what? That's right on time. It should have been like that a long time ago.
Mm-hmm.
Because we should set the narrative of how people treat us, and not the other way around. So thank you. I'll get off my soapbox.
And I'll even throw you an extra bone, Aisha. You technically don't have to call yourself an Xer or a millennial, because technically all of us are Xennials.
All right.
Which is a special little niche they carved out, because if you're the tail end of the X generation and the beginning end of the millennial, there's a crossover that happened technologically, where we went from analog technology to more digital things, and only that little subgroup at the end, the extreme ends of both of those, lived through and grew up for the change. So we grew up in analog households that also became digital before we became adults. And it gives us a unique perspective on things. So you're an
Thank
exennial.
you. Thank you. Thank you.
Yay! New vocabulary.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, in that case, the last thing I will ask is a question that will blow up the internet because I know it's blown up some conversations among my friends and family, which is the tendency nowadays to do gender swapping with traditional characters. And the example that's always brought up, and it irks me when they do it, but we'll work with it, is the Ghostbusters movie, where they redid Ghostbusters with a fully female cast, and the movie failed. My argument's always been the movie didn't fail because it was female. The movie failed because it was a bad movie. But I'd like to hear what you think. Even if you didn't see the movie itself, what is your thought on taking traditionally or established characters of one particular gender or race and changing it up to be more inclusive?
Um, that movie failed, like you said, because it's a bad movie, but I feel like they made a bad movie because it was women. I
Mm.
feel like if that had been a male cast, they would have put more effort into it for the reboot. And it would have been like the new reboot that's about to come out and looks great.
Hmm.
But they would have put that time and effort into it. I do like that we take different perspectives, though, of reboots or whatever, refashioned ways. I think that's important to see the different viewpoints of uh, this group of people or this section of society and how they would approach this or do it this way. At the same time, though, from being I'm a nerd, I'll admit it. Um,
And proud.
yes, I also would like to see originality and let's do something different. We've seen this before. So you kind of have both sides. I just think we put these constraints on ourselves and women mostly do it to other women about what's acceptable and what's not acceptable. And because we go along with that patriarchal mess that's been ingrained and put in our heads, that it's hard for us to even and that's why the literature conversation and the fiction conversation is so important, is because we can't even allow ourselves to visualize that.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely, build on that point, Brooke. And I'll just be honest. And this speaks to just the patriarchy that we fall under and live under every day. Gender swapping. I was like, say what now? Ghostbusters, lady. That was just my natural reaction, just being transparent. And this is somebody that does DEI work every day. But I'm like, what? What are you talking about? But that just speaks to how long we've just seen, a certain person, particularly men, in certain roles. And so I kind of lean as well to Brooke's statement with that, though, with as I'm okay with the gender swapping or gender moving across genders in terms of roles, as long as you honor that that actor or honor that show or honor that movie or honor that character
Hmm.
while still bringing authenticity to it. So it kind of speaking to Brooke's point, again, maybe it was the funding that was the issue, knowing that it was going to be all women. Well, we leaning into this whole patriarch system, like, we're not going to put our money in that. But at the same time, I would like to see in this Ghostbusters example, I would like to see women in that role. Absolutely. Could they do it? Sure. But do I want to see some authenticity too? Yeah. Like I don't want it to just look like the original Ghostbusters. I want it
Hmm.
to have that feminine trait, whatever that femininity means to you. So I'm not defining that for a woman, but whatever that means. So I still want that and more I want to say I want that woman's story in that role as that actor. So as long as that's happening, I'm okay with it. But I just to see the automatic just kind of swap with this whole story of, it'll be the same thing. No, I don't want it to be the same thing. I do want to open up and have those opportunities opened up for actors to be able to play any role despite the gender, but still being able to bring their story and honor the role at the same time, if that makes sense.
It makes perfect sense to me, and you actually encapsulated pretty well why I had such rage when one of the latest Star Wars movies came out. When they first introduced the character of Rey, so everybody was calling for a female lead for Star Wars because it is very male heavy, and then they gave us one, but instead of being authentic to the character, because remember, this is Star Wars, it's a made up galaxy in the future with sorcerers with laser swords. You can literally do anything. And what they chose to do was exactly carbon copy the first Star Wars and just put a
Yeah.
female in the place. And I'm like,
Yeah.
that's not progress, that's just lazy.
Yep,
Right.
they put no effort into it because it was a woman.
Mm-hmm. And then
Hmm.
yell in the name of, inclusivity. Like, no,
Hmm.
no.
Right.
Well,
Right.
we put one in there. Hmm.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Well, this has been a wonderful conversation. I,
No,
I
I really enjoyed it. Sorry, not to interrupt.
No, no, I was just going to ask if you enjoy it, so I'm happy to hear that.
Yes, I've enjoyed it too.
Now, just out of curiosity, do either one of you think you might be watching the show when it does air?
Yes.
I'd love to have you back because we'll be reviewing episodes as they air. So I'd love to have you back to discuss, whether they actually live up to their potential with, their female representation.
Yeah,
Do
I'm
I
gonna be
need to,
watching close. I'm gonna be watching now that we've had this discussion. I'm like, you know me, guys. I normally am just like, no. But now just having this discussion, I definitely want to lean into it and watch it and see if it does it justice. As we were talking
Mhm.
about with the Ghostbusters, if it does it justice.
Mhm.
should I do I need to read up on the series?
I don't think so. Because I know when we do those shows, we'll have a mix of fans that are deep into the books, passing expert nerd level stuff, and then we'll have people that are completely new to the series. That way
Oh,
we can
okay.
get all perspectives.
Okay, cool.
And I'll throw in as an added incentive, it wasn't the topic of our conversation, but in addition to having a high number of strong female characters, the author also included several representations of many different ethnic groups, which of course have different names because it's a fantasy novel series, but you can see the real world reflections of a lot of different ethnic groups from around the globe, and they were handled respectfully. So I hope
And
the show continues that too.
when did this author write this series?
He started in the 90s, if I remember correctly,
Okay.
and
Okay.
then finished in the early 2000s. Oh, well,
Okay,
passed
cool.
away, and then it got finished.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Nice.
Nice.
All right. Well, I hope to have you ladies back, but if not, I'm glad I had you, here this time. It was really great and wonderful conversation.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Next week will be the first fan podcast. Well, fans of the Wheel of Time series will share with us their hopes, their dreams, their expectations, and their greatest fears before the premiere. So if you are excited, but also just a little bit anxious, this is definitely the podcast for you. Join us next week for more Weaves and Will Talk. And please remember to like, comment, and subscribe. May you find shade, my friends.